Amara and Tony had built their life together. It was 15 long years ago when they exchanged vows under a canopy of woven palm leaves in a modest village ceremony. They were young, Amara just 19, Tony 22, full of the kind of boundless optimism that only youth can afford. Tony, with his sharp mind and infectious charm, had promised her the world. "I'll make you a queen, Amara," he'd whispered on their wedding night, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "We'll have a big house, cars, everything." Amara, with her gentle smile and unwavering faith, believed him. She came from a family of farmers, simple folk who taught her that love was about endurance, not extravagance. Together, they dreamed of a future filled with children, stability, and shared successes, but life, as it often does, had other plans. Tony's first job as a clerk in a small import-export firm ended abruptly when the company folded under economic pressures. He bounced from one opportunity to the next, a sales position here, a delivery gig there, but nothing stuck. Excuses piled up like unpaid bills, the boss was unfair, the economy was tanking, luck just wasn't on his side. Years bled into a relentless cycle of disappointments. The pot often sat empty on the stove, and nights grew colder than the harmattan wind that swept through their tiny one-room apartment, chilling their bones and testing their resolve. Through it all, Amara stood by him like an unyielding pillar. She never complained, never wavered. In the early days, she took to selling vegetables by the roadside, her voice calling out to passers-by amid the honking of downfall buses and the chatter of market women. "Fresh tomatoes. Sweet peppers," she'd shout, her hands stained with earth and her back aching from hours under the sun. The little money she made kept food on the table and a roof over their heads. As their family grew, first a son, Ode, then a daughter, Ife, she expanded her efforts. She learned tailoring from an aunt, stitching dresses and shirts late into the night by the dim light of a kerosene lamp. Her small business blossomed enough to cover the children's school fees, uniforms, and books. Tony would watch her sometimes, his face etched with guilt, but Amara always brushed it off with a soft touch and kind words. Whenever he sat by the narrow window of the apartment, staring blankly into the night, lost in his own frustrations, Amara would approach quietly. She'd place a gentle hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Don't worry, my love," she'd whisper, her voice a soothing balm. "God's time is the best. One day, things will change." Her faith was her anchor, and she shared it freely, pulling him back from the edge of despair. She reminded him of his talents, encouraged him to apply for more jobs, and prayed with him under the flickering bulb. In those moments, Tony would look at her with a mix of gratitude and shame, pulling her into a hug that spoke volumes of unspoken apologies, and then, one day, things did change. After years of rejections, Tony landed a big job, a logistics manager position at a multinational company dealing in oil and gas. The interview had been grueling, but his charm and persistence paid off. He came home that evening with a contract in hand, his face lit up like the city lights at dusk. "Amara, I got it," he shouted, sweeping her into his arms. She laughed through tears, thanking God aloud as they danced around the cramped room. For the first time in years, he donned creased suits, carried a sleek briefcase, and spoke in polished corporate tones about supply chains and international deals. Amara was overjoyed, her heart swelling with pride. She organized a small celebration with neighbors, roasting chicken and sharing stories of their struggles. "God has answered our prayers," she said to anyone who would listen, her eyes shining as she watched Tony bask in their attention, but the joy was short-lived. Subtle shifts began to creep in, like shadows lengthening at sunset. At first, it was little things. Tony stopped eating her home-cooked meals, claiming they were too local for his new palate. He'd come home late from meetings, smelling of unfamiliar perfumes and expensive cologne. When Amara asked about his day, he'd snap over small issues, his patience fraying like an old thread. "Not now, Amara. I'm tired," he'd say, waving her off. Then the insult started, sharp and unexpected, like thorns hidden in a bouquet. One evening, as she served him dinner, he pushed the plate away. "You won't understand this kind of life, Amara. You've never worked in a real office." His words stung, but she swallowed her hurt, chalking it up to stress. Another time, as she prepared for a family outing, he eyed her simple Ankara dress with disdain. "Why do you still dress like a market woman? My colleagues are wearing designer brands." Amara looked at herself in the cracked mirror, seeing the lines of exhaustion etched on her face from years of hard work, and felt a pang of inadequacy. The most painful blow came during a heated argument about money. Tony, flush with his new salary, had been spending lavishly on gadgets and outings. When Amara suggested saving for the children's future, he exploded. "You're becoming old, Amara. Look at yourself. My colleagues' wives don't look like this, wrinkled and worn out." Her heart twisted, but she held back tears, reminding herself of their vows. One night, the dam broke. Amara tried to talk to him, her voice trembling as she reached for his hand. "Tony, what's happening to us? We used to be a team." He yanked away, his face contorted in anger. "You're nothing but an old farmer's pig. You held me back all these years with your small-minded ways." The words echoed in the room like a slap, shattering something deep inside her. Amara stood frozen, the man she had loved and supported now glaring at her with contempt, as if she were the source of all his failures. A few weeks later, the betrayal solidified. Tony brought another woman into their home, Eva, young, flashy, and dripping with pride. She sauntered in like she owned the place, her tight dress and heavy makeup a stark contrast to Amara's modest style. Tony didn't even hide it, he announced it boldly. "Amara, pack your things and leave. Eva is moving in." The children, wide-eyed and confused, clung to their mother as she gathered their belongings. Humiliated and heartbroken, Amara left with nothing but her dignity and her 2 children. She cried until her eyes were swollen, the sobs racking her body in the back of a taxi heading to her sister's house. But she did not curse him. Instead, in the quiet of that painful night, she made a vow to herself: "One day, you will see who you threw away." Years passed, and Amara channeled her anguish into fuel for transformation. She refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she poured every ounce of pain into progress. Enrolling in online business courses through a borrowed laptop, she learned about marketing, supply chains, and e-commerce, skills she never thought she'd need. Her tailoring business, once a side hustle, became her lifeline. She expanded it meticulously, sourcing fabrics from local weavers and designing pieces that blended traditional African prints with modern cuts. Word spread through social media, and soon her creations were shipping internationally to Europe, the US, even Asia. Her designs caught the eye of influencers and celebrities. A popular Nollywood actress wore one of her gowns to a red carpet event, tagging Amara Couture in her post. Orders flooded in, and within 5 years, Amara Couture had become one of the most sought-after fashion brands in Nigeria. She hired a team, opened boutiques in Lagos and Abuja, and collaborated with international designers. The quiet, timid wife of yesteryear was gone. In her place stood a confident, elegant woman who commanded boardrooms and runways alike. Success brought luxuries she once only dreamed of. She moved into a sprawling mansion in Lekki, with manicured gardens and a pool that sparkled under the sun. Luxury cars, a sleek Mercedes and a Range Rover lined her driveway. Her children, Ode and Ife, attended the best private schools, excelling in academics and extracurriculars. Amara herself transformed, regular spa visits, stylish outfits from her own line, and a glow that came from inner strength. She spoke at women's empowerment seminars, sharing her story not with vengeance, but with inspiration. "Pain can break you or build you," she'd say. "I chose to build." Meanwhile, Tony's world crumbled like a house of cards in a storm. Eva, it turned out, was a gold digger through and through. She reveled in his wealth, demanding gifts and trips, but her loyalty was as fleeting as a Lagos rain shower. When Tony got entangled in a corruption scandal at work falsifying logistics reports to skim profits, he was caught red-handed. The company fired him immediately, disowning him in a public statement that splashed across newspapers and social media. His so-called friends vanished like smoke, unwilling to associate with a tarnished name. Eva didn't hesitate. Overnight, she packed her bags and disappeared, but not before draining his savings account through unauthorized transfers. Tony woke to empty bank alerts and a cold, silent house. Desperate, he tried to find work, pounding pavements and sending resumes, but his reputation was in ruins. Whispers followed him, "That's the one who got sacked for fraud." Doors slammed shut, and within months, the once proud man was broke, alone, and drowning in a sea of regret. He sold his suit for scraps, moved to a dingy room in a slum, and scavenged for odd jobs that barely paid for meals. Nights were spent replaying his mistakes, the weight of his arrogance crushing him. One evening, as he wandered the bustling streets of Ikeja, hungry and disheveled, a giant billboard caught his eye. It glowed in the city's heart, towering over the traffic, Amara Couture grand opening. He froze, his breath catching. The woman on the billboard, glowing, radiant, elegant in a flowing gown of her own design, was his ex-wife. Her smile was confident, her eyes sharp with the fire of someone who had risen from ashes. Tony stared, a mix of shock, envy, and guilt twisting in his gut. How had she done it? The woman he had dismissed as an old farmer's pig now shone like a star. Curiosity and annoying guilt dragged him to the event the next day. The grand opening was at an upscale venue in Victoria Island, alive with lights, music, and the chatter of elite guests. Tony stood at the entrance in a cheap, wrinkled shirt he'd bought from a street vendor, feeling like an intruder. He watched from the shadows as Amara stepped out of a sleek black Mercedes, her driver holding the door. Cameras flashed like fireworks, reporters calling her name. She walked the red carpet with poise, her silk gown shimmering, every eye drawn to her beauty and success. Influencers snapped selfies with her, celebrities praised her designs, and business tycoons shook her hand. When her gaze landed on him, lurking near the barriers, her smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of recognition, then returned, calm and unbothered. Tony's heart raced. He pushed through the crowd, his voice hoarse. "Amara, please. I've lost everything. I made a mistake." She turned to him, her expression unreadable, the crowd parting slightly as security hovered nearby. "A mistake," she said softly, her voice steady but laced with quiet strength. "No, Tony. You made a choice." He fell to his knees right there on the pavement, the humiliation complete. Tears streamed down his face as he clutched at her hem. "Please, I was blinded by the money, the status. You were the only one who truly loved me. I see that now." Amara sighed, stepping closer just enough for him to catch the faint scent of her perfume, elegant, floral, a far cry from the simple scents of their past. The fragrance filled the air, a reminder of how far she'd come. "I begged you to see my worth then, Tony," she replied, her tone measured, without malice but firm. "But you called me names. You threw me away when I had nothing, when we had nothing. Now that I have everything, what makes you think I'll take you back? That I share this life I built from the ruins you left me in?" Her words hung between them, heavy and final. Tony looked up, searching her eyes for any trace of the forgiving woman he once knew, but found only resolve. The guards approached gently, their hands firm on his arms as they led him away. "Sir, you need to leave," one said, his voice professional but kind. Tony didn't resist. He stumbled back into the night, the sounds of laughter and applause fading behind him, as the doors to the venue closed behind Amara, sealing her into her new world, a realm of opportunity and admiration. Tony stood alone on the street. The city lights blurred through his tears, and the night swallowed him whole. In that moment, he realized the profound truth: the woman he had once mocked, belittled, and discarded had become everything he wished he could be. Successful, respected, unbreakable, but it was too late. Never despise the one who stood by you when you had nothing, because one day, they may become everything you've ever wanted.